Hello friends, welcome to my channel SushantChessWise. Today onwards we are going to start a new series related to the play in the close positions. So we are going to discuss what are the key factors of play in the close positions. So one of the main concepts is that of pawn chain. We'll quickly get into the lesson. Today's whole discussion will be openings related to pawn chain, the middle game, and little bit about endgame also, what we should look at and what we should do. So let's quickly get into the position here. This is the position at hand. Just we are going to understand the pawns in this position. So ignore the kings for the time being. Let us understand what is pawn chain. So when the pawns are blocked like this, like we have here, three pair of pawns, the white pawns you can see have lot of space gained in the center, and similarly black you can see has e6, d5 and c4 pawns. The pawns are blocked by each other, hence the term chain. So what happens here, there are few concepts related to this. Firstly, the head of the pawn chain, the pawn which is most advanced here, the e5 pawn. See, this is the head of the pawn chain, and similarly the pawn c3 here is the base of the pawn chain. Similarly, blacks, if you see, the base of the pawn chain is the pawn on e6. So the head of the black's pawn chain is the pawn on c4. So what happens is the sides mutually try to attack each other's base of the pawn chain. Let us move to the next diagram to understand this in a better way. Let's have a look at this position here. You can see that the white rook is right now, see, protecting his own pawn, which is attacking the base on the square e6. This time the base is, see, the fixed ones. The e6 is the base of the pawn chain and d5 is the head of the pawn chain. Similarly for white, you can see we are not considering the c3 pawn as base but the d4 pawn, and the head of the pawn is the pawn on e5. So pawns which are fixed will be considered for head and base. So here the concepts of outpost emerges, and the idea is to always attack the base pawn. So white wants to see trade on f6. Once again, do ignore the king placings. We are not going to use tactics based on that right now. So after pawn takes pawn takes, and see a square on an open file. The rook is on the open file which is supported by a pawn is called outpost. An outpost is created and the rook can emerge on f6, and we can try to make the black on e8 very passive, and after here either d takes, white can bring forward his king, so that can give him decent advantage. But of course, if we have understood the concept well, black will also do the same. He will take on d4, and after takes, recaptures and rook c4, black also does the same. And see, after rook e6, rook d4, there will be mutual exchange of pawns sooner or later. So this is how we use the outpost. This is how we attack the base of the pawn. Further, we are going to discuss some important points related to this in the opening. Let's get to the opening phase now. So let's quickly get to a position from an opening where the pawn chain is very prominent. So after e4, e6, d4, d5, white plays the move e5. Mostly beginners consider this e5 move to be really great because, see, pawn advances, it snatches this place for the knight on f6. The bishop cannot go to d6. Very well, white got space, but he has also wasted one pawn move. Instead of developing a piece, he has played the pawn. And see, as usual, as we discussed in the previous examples, the pawn chain is formed. So one of the most fundamental concept of any pawn chain is always we have to first attack the base of the pawn chain. Means we will try to attack the d4 square, this one, and then only we will try to hit the head. We will see how and why. So here black plays the move c5, instantly challenging white center. Now white has three options. One, ideally he should always support the center with the move c3, which will help him to gain the space and retain it. Let's say white plays d takes c5 and surrenders the center. Then not only black gets development with bishop c5, the bishop becomes very active, but also the e5 pawn is itself becoming weak. Let's say nc3, and now immediately black challenges the e5 pawn. Now see, e5 pawn is alone, so white doesn't care whether it is head or the base. It is treated like a base, and after ef nf6 you can look at the black position. The center has totally been surrendered, so these pawns are very strong now. They are all set to advance, and if white tries to hold them, I'll show you. Let's say nf3, nc6, and play here bb5. This happens to be one of the main ways to stop e5. Otherwise, let's say bd3, then e5. Black gets the good move e5, and now see, there is threat of e4, d4. The bishop is opened, and see, even castle is possible. So black has got the center, better development, and active pieces as well. So black is definitely clearly better here. And if white insists on playing bb5 here, then castle, bishop into c6, bc, trying to cover the e5 square once again with all force. But here what happens? There comes a tactical blow, bf2 check. It's instantly game over. Look at black's development. So king f2 forced and knight g4 check. King moves wherever. G1 is lost on the spot. Queen check. Bishop moves to his three mates. So maybe king e1 is absolutely necessary. But then see, knight takes e5. Nothing much needs to be done. Black is already pawn up, poorly placed white king. And see, the remaining pieces also you will see black's pieces are way more active. Queen h4 is in fact a threat as well. So of course, black is winning there. Let's look at another move. Let's say nc3 is played here. Then to the same story, black takes cd4, queen takes d4, knight c6 attacks the queen, and see, once again the center is damaged. This time white can try bb5 here, somewhat better than the previous example. Black goes bd7, and after bishop c6 comes the good move, pawn takes bishop. Now also we note that black center pawns c6 and d4 are going to become mobile, and black's bishop pair will become really powerful. It's really hard for a beginner to understand when to count the bishop pair as an active source. Sometimes the bishop is passive, but still weaker players think, oh, I have the bishop pair. So it's a bit tricky to understand. Let me show you now. If nf3 here, then c5, queen perhaps has to go back to d1. Ask question to both the bishops. Are both the bishops open? Then we will say the bishop pair is effective. Is the center open? Then the bishop pair is effective. So these are two main conditions. Here black has two strong ways to continue. One, he can play outright c bishop c6 castle and play d4, use his center strongly, or else he can play the move d4 straight away, knight e4, bishop c6. Here too, black position is way better. Look at the squares next to the enemy pawn. See, these become useful outposts usually for the knight. This point we will elaborate in more detail in the next lesson. So white plays the right move, c3 here. This is the correct way to play. Black plays nc6, and here white should generally play the move knight f3, which is one of the best ways of playing. But this example is meant to explain few other points. So we are using the move bishop e3, which looks also decent at first. There are 2 points. Firstly, white protects d4, and if the circumstance arises, white is happy to give up his bad bishop. See, the pawns are fixed on the bishop's color, hence we use the term bad bishop. This bishop is somewhat passive. So let's say black's best move perhaps is qb6 here, but white can play qd2. The play still retains sharp characteristics. But if black plays cd4 instantly, then white uses the strong move bd4. Let me invert this position and show you. Here the bishop on d4, see, strangely looks very odd. It's fixed between two pawns, and generally the term used for such a bishop is a tall pawn, right? But here white is ready to surrender it for this knight, because black's own bishop on c8 is also really bad. So let's say if knight d4, then white will be really happy to go qd4, not cd4. we want to use this square d4, and if black tries to repulse this queen by an e7, white plays an f3 and c6, the queen moves to f4. See, great place here. There is no bishop on c1. Queen is not obstructing this bishop's path anymore, and the remaining pieces are all eyeing to come to the king side, you can see. Okay. So white can hope for a very good attack, especially because of the bad bishop here on e8. And if black breaks the position with x6, this is like the previous example, really opposite of that, because here white's development is more, and the square e5 becomes a strong blockading square or outpost for the white pieces. Let's say bb5 here, and after fe, of course, blunder, there comes knight e5, serious pressure on f7 and c6, and if a6 is played, then white happily takes castles, and same story after fe knight e5, you can see white is clearly better. The other knight is eyeing the square d2, f3 and maybe d4. Here also you will say that okay, black has bishop pair, but this time look at the bishops. This c8 bishop is far worse than the previous case where black was getting c5 and d4 easily. Moreover, knight on e5 is really well placed. So basically the whole purpose of the lesson was to show you the squares in front of the pawn. These two here, d4 and e5, are the key squares that one has to look to control. So when the pawns are gone, the pieces occupy them. The concept of restraint or not letting the enemy pawns move, the blockade, is very important. So this was a base lesson. For the upcoming lessons based on blockade, the kingside attack, the force of the e5 pawn, the power of the pawn chain in general, which is going to be continued. So I hope you liked this lesson. Definitely let me know in the comments below. Thanks for your time.